Holy shit, the OPXY is out and it's $2,300, which is expensive. This is not a trashing video. It's really just to put things into perspective. That's really the point of this video. And maybe to relieve some gas, or at least redirect the gas into a different direction, maybe. Like I said, I don't want the comment section of this video to turn into like a teenage engineering trash fest. I've checked out the reviews of the OPXY. I've read the comment sections of my own teenage engineering related videos. I've done like 90 of them at this point. So I've seen all the comments, I've seen all the TE hate, I guess you could call it maybe. I'm not discouraging anyone from picking up the OPXY. Of course, if you think it's fun, or if you own the OP1 and you find that it suits your workflow, then go for it, of course. I'm not really in the position to judge anyone's purchase decisions, considering that I could do pretty much everything that my gear is capable of in my DAW and my computer. Right, it's really all about perspective. At the moment, I actually don't own the OPXY, and there's a good chance that I'll eventually get my grubby little hands onto it. I'm sure it's fun as just like every other teenage engineering unit. That being said, there's still like a reality in regards to the price of the unit versus what it's actually capable of doing in comparison to all of the other gear that's available today. Before all this, a few ways of supporting. I have an open Discord. It's an open server and we have a lot of fun, so join up if you're into that sort of thing. To show some extra support, join my Patreon. I have a growing catalog of exclusive and extended videos, as well as discounts on products that I've released. There actually are affiliate links to all of the, I guess we'll call it alternative gear in this video. Ironically, an affiliate link for the OPXY as well, if you'd like to purchase it in the end. I've bought really expensive gear in the past. I'm sure that a lot of us have. But again, still, hopefully this video will help put things into perspective. Let's start by getting into the capabilities and the attraction, the overall attraction of the OPXY. It goes without saying that the hype factor, like the I want that effect, is always there with teenage engineering products. Another obvious attraction is the portability to functionality ratio. Like with pretty much all other teenage engineering gear, I've seen one artist in particular use like a setup of teenage engineering gear in his live set, and it's pretty dope. Go check him out. Shout out to Fabe89 on Instagram. And that's something you kind of have to hand to teenage engineering, the portability factor. In terms of composing mobile, like in different places, you have a lot of flexibility with teenage engineering gear, of course. The OPXY looks like an OP1 field mixed with an OPZ. The OP1 or OP1 field is notorious for having like very weird, I guess you could say non-practical sequencers. Like they didn't have a solid step sequencer. And so the OPZ was invented, it came along, and it sort of filled that hole because it has a really strong sequencer. The OPXY has its step params right here on the top row. Beneath that, it has a keyboard with a bunch of different symbols on the keys, much like with the OPZ. I remember these being different performance, like punch-in settings, much like the Pocket Operators or even the EP133. So that's a quick overview of the OPXY. Let's get into the point of this video though. Before giving into the gas, take a breath, and we'll see what else we could purchase with $2,300. And just to be ridiculous right off the bat, let's say, assuming that you have the space, the MPC-X. It's a massive sampling workstation, sampler, and sequencer. Mind you, what I'm looking for here is used, so it's going for $1,500. So in this hypothetical situation, that leaves you with $800 left. Maybe you could pick up a Digitac 2, which would be a little bit more expensive than $2,300 combined. You can also pick up an OG Digitac, which I thought was discontinued, but I guess not apparently. The capability of these two units separately, so you have like a portable sampler versus a giant master at-home studio sampler, the MPC-X. If you're more of a DAW user, Electron Gear is also compatible with your DAW through Overbridge, the software. To my knowledge, there isn't any sort of sophisticated DAW software that teenage engineering offers, so that's kind of off the table. You've also got the portability factor with the Digitac, although it's not quite as convenient as the OPXY, which is fully battery powered. Okay, let's shift the focus here, still staying in the large units category. So again, if you have the space, Arturia recently came out with the Polybrute 12, which is more expensive than the OPXY. I would hope so. But the Polybrute, which has gone down as a boss of a synth, is just a little bit more expensive than the OPXY brand new. And wouldn't you know, here's a new one selling at the same price as the OPXY, 3,100 Canadian, which is $2,300. US. Let's just check out the specs just to get an idea here. All analog polysynth, 61 velocity and aftertouch capable keys, 2 analog oscillators per voice, 2 ADSR and 1 DAD SR envelope per voice with looping functionality, 3 LFOs per voice, 3 stereo digital effect slots for modulation effects, delay, and reverb. There's a master EQ with 7 available presets, pretty cool. There's a 12 by 32 modulation matrix, 64-step polyphonic sequencer with 3 tracks of automation and accent and slide per step. Anyways, I'm gonna stop reading this because it's gonna make me wanna buy this thing. My point is all of that for the price of the OPXY. Maybe you're someone who doesn't have that much space in your studio. And it's actually possible that if you were interested in the OPXY, that's kind of what you're paying for, is that you have like a tiny studio in this tiny little rectangle. In which case, I get it. So what about gear combos, combinations of smaller units to cover all your grounds? How about starting with a drum machine combined with a synthesizer? If you've watched this channel, you know that the TR-8S is a great drum machine. Here's a video on why it's mind-blowingly awesome. It's $750 brand new. Okay, so what about a synth over top of that? I'm currently using the Korg OP6 Mark II, but with the keys, which I really like, but without the keys, it's $700 brand new. So still close to another 1,000 left. Let's add another really high quality effects unit over top of this. The Eventide H90, which is also a very expensive unit, is $900 brand new. And yes, technically the OPXY can touch on everything that all 3 of these units can do, and I guess that's kind of the point of it in a way. But when you look at it a little closer in terms of flexibility, there's just no comparison between those 3 instruments versus the OPXY. The TR-8S is super hands-on, and by the way, you could also use it as an audio interface if you wanted to. You could also use it as a very solid Ableton Live MIDI controller. And this is just one example. You could of course swap out the drum machine. Maybe you'd rather the Digitact or some other drum machine, the Mini Freak or the Micro Freak instead of the OP6 Mark II, a different effects unit, and you'd still kind of be in the same ballpark in terms of price. And of course, we're talking on the brand new market. If you wanted to venture into the used market, if you're comfortable doing that, you could cut a huge chunk of this price away and possibly even purchase like a 4th unit for your setup for the same price as the OPXY. And this brings us to the price of gear combos in my collection in comparison to the price of the OPXY. I've spent over 5 years now creating synth related content for a living. This is what I do for a living now. So I've seen a lot of gear, and I actually started with teenage engineering gear at the beginning. I started with the OPZ actually, which is a much more affordable unit than the OPXY. But for me, it was a really good entrance into this whole world for sure. But over the years, I have like a much more acquired taste for the gear that I'm interested in. And that taste definitely has become more expensive. But at this point, I'm someone who's willing to pay the price after I've done my research on gear that I know is going to be capable of the things that I want it to do. Let's take a look at the Analog Rhythm Mark II, which honestly is just one of the best units around right now. It's a drum machine, but it's also a lot more than that. So a few features or highlights in my opinion: 12 voices, it's got 8 audio outputs. You can't take for granted that electron sequencer, of course. One of the top sequencers in the game, much more flexible than any TE sequencer. The analog rhythm is of course analog, but you can also sample over top of those analog sounds or mute the analog sounds and create fully sampled rhythms. All in all, I just know that it's a much more capable and flexible unit in comparison to the OPXY. Brand new, it's 300 less than the OPXY. And if you look on Reverb, I'm seeing one here for 1,800 Canadian, which is about $1,200 US. Oh, and would you look at that, there's also an Analog 4 Mark II, which is like the melodic version of the Analog Rhythm Mark II. Also an insanely capable unit, and combining those two together is super fun. I'm actually just getting into that now. And yeah, the Analog 4 Mark II is going for $850 US on Reverb. So that lethal combination is still like $100 or $200 less than the OPXY. And these are two of Elektron's most expensive units, by the way. Another really important thing to put into perspective here is that these Elektron units were released years ago. Like the Analog 4 is 7 or 8 years old. Same with the Analog Rhythm, I think it's maybe 6 or 7. The Octatrack is like 12 years old. And again, all of this is expensive. They are expensive units, but not compared to the brand spanking new OPXY. It just goes to show that newer, shinier gear doesn't necessarily mean better gear or better quality gear. A lot of it is just marketing. I think that's a really important thing to take away from this video. If there's one thing you take away, that's a really important one. But I guess the downside of all that Elektron gear is that you can't compose on an airplane with it. The SSL Big Six is another one. The SSL Big Six is like a standard, serious, professional, high-end studio quality mixer and audio interface. So it's like a hybrid of those two things. 12 inputs, fully analog. You could EQ all your tracks. Obviously, it's just a lot more tactile. All of your controls are right there. You can route software effects to a live performance, hardware effects to a software performance, etc., etc. So the point is that it's just a really flexible unit. And the Big Six is also quite an expensive unit for what it is. But I found one here on Reverb for 3,100 Canadian, which is 2,300 US dollars. The price of the OPXY. So to me, that's insane. That comparison is just insane. You can buy a very solid MacBook Pro M1 for $2,300. The computer I use for everything, same price as the OPXY. I think you get it. If you're still all in on the OPXY, I get it. Teenage Engineering gear is fun as f to play with. There's a certain fluidity and flexibility to pretty much everything that they put out. And they always find a unique workflow, a unique way to present their products. You can never put your finger on what they're gonna come up with next. I'm still an OP1 field owner, and for the synth sound, it's still one of my favorite synths that exists. And to have a cool, like, integrated, elevated workflow with those synth sounds, like, I understand the attraction. It probably is really fun to play with. And again, if it makes sense to you, if you could afford it, then there's nothing wrong with picking one up. It's a matter of preference, and the ultimate end goal, of course, is to have fun. That's what I have for you today. Join the Discord. If you'd like to go the extra step, go with Patreon. There's affiliate links. Like, subscribe, share the video. Thanks for being here, and hope to see you in the next one.